Hey there, and welcome to today's Explainer. We have got a super practical topic lined up for you real estate investors out there. We're going to break down the capital expense timeline specifically for Kansas City rentals. And we're pulling this directly from the expertise of Alpine Property Management, Kansas City, a property management company that's been serving investors right here since 2013. Now, before we jump in, just a quick heads up. This content is strictly educational, all right? Not legal or tax advice. And always keep in mind that local regulations, and honestly, even the housing stock variations, are going to differ depending on whether your property sits on the Missouri or the Kansas side of the state line. So, let's get into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is exactly what we're looking at today. First, maintenance versus capital expenses. Second, Kansas City property stressors. Third, inspecting before you buy. And finally, building a capital fund.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, Maintenance versus Capital Expenses, the budgeting mistake.
I want you to ask yourself a question right now. Really think about it. Is your maintenance reserve hiding a capital disaster? Look, if you're just, setting aside a flat percentage of rent every month and calling it a day, you might assume you've got enough cash on hand to handle anything. But I'm telling you, relying on a standard maintenance reserve to cover major system failures, that is a recipe for a massive financial shock.
So let's establish our baseline vocabulary here so we're all on the exact same page. Routine maintenance, that refers to small repairs and standard turnover costs. Think, some fresh paint, patching a bit of flooring, or finally fixing that leaky faucet. A capital expense, though? Well, that is a totally different beast. This is a full component replacement. We're talking a brand new roof, a totally new furnace, or literally digging up a whole sewer lateral. You absolutely have to mentally and financially separate these two categories.
$500. Now, Alpine actually uses a standard $500 per door reserve, but, and this is a big but, I want to strongly emphasize that this figure is only meant for routine maintenance and small cash flow buffers, right? It handles a busted garbage disposal or maybe a snapped cabinet hinge. It is absolutely not designed to replace an entire major system.
And here is the crucial reality check. Your standard reserve might be $500 per door, but your capital reality, that is more like $6,000 to $12,000 for a single sewer or roof event. Let's put that into perspective. If you rely on that tiny $500 reserve to fix a roof in older suburbs like, say, Independence or Raytown, it would literally take you 12 to 24 years to self-fund that single event. The math simply does not work out.
Moving right along to Section 2, Kansas City property stressors, weather and housing age.
Now, local geography can actively work against rental properties around here, especially when we talk about the big three systems, and this brilliantly illustrates why. First, the roof. It faces concentrated spring hail and crazy wind events. So what does that mean? You'll look to an insurance claim first, and then tap your reserve for the deductible. Next up, the HVAC system. This thing takes a brutal beating from a full summer heat load, followed immediately by a hard fall freeze. That cost? That is coming straight out of your owner capital reserve. And finally, the sewer lateral. You're dealing with pre-1940 clay pipes and massive mature street trees. All of this just proves that local stressors mandate highly specific funding strategies.
Let's zoom in on some specific neighborhood risks for a second. Pre-1940s housing in highly desirable areas, places like Waldo, Brookside, or the historic Northeast, well, they hide a silent threat. Clay pipe root intrusion. These pipes, they slowly narrow over time and then, boom, they fail without warning and usually on a weekend when plumbers cost double. And remember this, the city water utility is explicitly clear that everything past the curb box is your responsibility. It is absolutely not the city's problem to fix.
$1.6 billion. Let that sink in for a moment. According to 2025 Missouri Department of Commerce data, that is the massive statewide total for insurance claims, mostly driven by wind and hail damage. This just flat out proves that a roof's true lifespan in this corridor is dictated by its actual storm exposure. It is not based on whatever manufacturer warranty card happened to come in the box. A rated lifespan assumes typical conditions, right? Well, Kansas City weather is practically the definition of atypical. Then, of course, we have the classic seasonal failure. A marginal HVAC system that somehow miraculously survived running all summer long will very often completely die on the first truly cold night of the fall season. That sudden freeze is literally the ultimate load test, and this routinely catches unprepared, out-of-state owners completely off guard. Why? Because they only budgeted for minor repairs, not a $4,000 heat exchanger replacement right before the holidays.
Okay, on to Section 3, Inspecting before you buy, the Alpine checklist.
All right, so here is Alpine's exact 4-part due diligence checklist. You absolutely must complete this before you go removing any financing contingencies. Step 1, check the roof install date and hunt down any prior insurance claims tied to it. Step 2, verify the HVAC data tag and get your hands on the actual service history. Step 3, and listen, this is totally non-negotiable for older properties, order a camera scope for pre-1960 sewer laterals. Do not skip that. And step 4, meticulously review seller disclosures for electrical and water heater age. The good news? A licensed inspector can knock out all 4 of these in a single visit.
And our final section today, Section 4, Building a Capital Fund, Protecting Your Cash Flow.
So let's break down the practical, on-the-ground rules for building this fund. First up, you have got to base your fund on the component's actual time on the clock, not some generic flat percentage of rent. I mean, a roof with a recent hail claim has a totally different timeline than a brand new build, right? Second, obtain 2 contractor quotes during acquisition so you actually have a real targeted planning figure. Third, fund your capital sinking fund directly from property cash flow. And finally, keep that capital line strictly separate from your standard operating reserve. Honestly, skipping these steps just means you are buying capital risk that you simply chose to ignore.
You see, proactive management really changes the entire equation here. Alpine manages over 250 properties, and they always schedule HVAC tune-ups in September. Why September? To prevent those incredibly expensive November emergency calls. Finding a potential failure during a scheduled visit, well, that just costs the price of a part. Finding it on a freezing Friday night in November, that costs an emergency dispatch fee plus a hotel bill for your freezing tenant. This kind of local relationship and proactive approach is exactly why turnovers on well-managed properties stay right near a super low 14-day average vacancy. I want to let this quote linger for a moment, because it perfectly hits the nail on the head and summarizes the core budgeting myth we've dismantled today. You simply cannot price your entire capital risk into a tiny maintenance reserve. A real capital event needs a dedicated sinking fund from day one. So I want you to take a hard look at your own portfolio today. Are you truly capitalized for the realities of Kansas City real estate? Or are you just one bad storm away from wiping out your entire cash flow? For help managing your Kansas City rental property, call Alpine at 816-343-4520 or visit alpinekansascity.com.